Hello, this is Abebe Nagash on behalf of Ethiopian Hearts for Peace and African Hearts for Peace. Today I am looking at the U.S. national security strategies for 2025 and what it means for Africa, what it means for Ethiopians, Somalis, Eritreans, Sudanese, whoever is a refugee. Because it is a frightening moment for a lot of immigrants in the United States. We need to air this out. Just to rewind back, during the Cold War, the Horn of Africa became a battlefield for global powers. Our lands were flooded with foreign weapons. Our governments were reshaped by foreign influence. Our conflicts were prolonged, not solved. Millions fled because superpowers competed on African soil. Today, decades later, the children of those wars, now Americans, workers, parents, citizens, are being told to go back, detained without paper review or threatened with deportation. Intervention created the refugees. Now non-intervention is denying them safety. This is a double injustice. A refugee does not leave home by choice. They leave because home was taken from them. And once they rebuild their lives, their business, their savings, stripping them again is inhumane. This is why we call for dignity, truth, and fairness, for responsible policy, for human treatment, and for the recognition that refugees are not numbers. They are survivors of global decisions far bigger than themselves. This is the truth, what happened to the creation of refugees, starting from World War II. Why do we say this? A double injustice. How U.S. intervention created refugees and how U.S. non-intervention now denies them safety. Because for more than half a century, Africa, especially the Horn of Africa, has been shaped by a global competition it did not choose. During the Cold War, the Horn became one of the largest proxy landscapes in the world. Ethiopia, Somalia, Eritrea, Sudan, and others paid the price for the geopolitical rivalry between the United States and the USSR. Their wars were not simply local. They were fueled, prolonged, and magnified by foreign weapons, foreign intelligence services, foreign military advisors, foreign ideology, foreign competition, foreign blockade and sanctions, foreign training, foreign propaganda. And when these wars destroyed families and nations, millions fled. The refugee outflow from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s were not accidents. They were the direct consequences of global powers fighting for influence on African soil. The first injustice. Refugees were created by global power struggles. People fled because Ethiopia was turned into a front line between East and West. Somalia was armed, disarmed, and rearmed by external powers. Eritrea's liberation war became a theater of global rivalry. Sudan's civil wars were fed by foreign competition. Regional instability was incentivized, not prevented. These refugees did not want to leave home. They were forced out by historical forces beyond their control. 2. The second injustice. Today, those same refugees are told to go back. What is today? Under a new era of non-intervention, the United States is tightening immigration enforcement without recognizing the cause that forced the refugees to come in the first place. And ICE enforcement is not surgical, it is blunt, quick, often careless. Agents cannot determine in 5 seconds whether someone is a US citizen, a green card holder, a refugee, a visa worker, an asylum applicant, a naturalized American, or even someone whose entire family died in war. They see only skin tone, accent, appearance. And in many cases, citizens are detained. Green card holders are threatened. TPS holders are panic-stricken. Naturalized immigrants fear losing everything. Business owners face ruin. Families fear separation. Livelihoods built over 20 to 40 years can be wiped out. This is a silent trauma happening every day. 3. The terrible irony. Intervention created the refugees. Non-intervention now abandons them. The same global power that helped destabilize much of the Horn of Africa during the Cold War is now refusing to acknowledge any moral responsibility for the people who fled those destabilizations. Hundreds of thousands of Africans, especially from Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Sudan, are now American citizens or lawful residents who rebuilt their lives, worked hard, and followed the rules. Now they fear deportation, property loss, retirement loss, business asset seizure, separation from children, return to countries they have no connection with, being sent to a country that is not their origin. Some are imported to countries that are not their origin. Yes, this has already happened in multiple cases. People who were born in Ethiopia but grew up in the US are mistaken for Eritrean or Sudanese. Somali Americans are deported to Kenya or Uganda. Eritreans are sent to Ethiopia. Ethiopians are sent to Djibouti or Sudan. This is a violation of identity, a violation of human dignity, a violation of justice. 4. The moral argument is why this is unfair and historically inconsistent. America benefited from Cold War engagements strategically, economically, and ideologically. Africa paid a price through conflict, displacement, and instability. The descendants of those same conflicts come seeking safety, only to face a second punishment. To tell a refugee, go back where you come from, return home, you don't belong here, is to erase the truth that geopolitical decisions made in Washington, Moscow, and other capitals shaped the refugee flows of an entire generation. It is to deny the complexity of global history. It is to ignore US responsibility, not blame, but responsibility. 5. The human truth. No refugee leaves home willingly. People leave only when survival is impossible. And once they rebuild a life, working hard, paying taxes, raising children, stripping them of safety is a second trauma. It's like burning a house twice. Some of the children can't speak their native language now. So what is this for the African Hearts for Peace? And in that perspective, what is it? From a peace-building viewpoint, this situation reveals a deep contradiction in global power. When intervention happens, Africans suffer. When intervention stops, Africans still suffer. This teaches us a profound truth. Africa must build its own peace system. its own safety nets, its own political stability, its own councils of wisdom, because relying on global powers has always been a gamble. If this is true, and then let us see what the 2025 United States strategy look like line by line. The actual document I received is, or downloaded from the internet, has several focal points I would like to pinpoint for you. The document is very long and it contains a lot of things. So the 2025 U.S. national security strategy and its implications for Africa, Ethiopia, and global peace can be described as follows. First, let me introduce this document. The National Security Strategy of the United States of America 2025 marks a dramatic strategic realignment in U.S. global posture. It is a departure from the humanitarian, liberal, democratic, and multinationalist frameworks that define the Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Biden eras. In its place stands an openly transactional, sovereignty-centered, economically protectionist, and investment-driven posture that redefines the U.S. relationship with the world. For Africa, and especially for the Horn of Africa, this strategy has profound implications that will reshape peace, conflict, trade, diplomacy, migration, and energy development for the next decade. Our review examines the document's major themes, its philosophical foundations, its prioritization of global regions, and the transformation it proposes for the United States-Africa relationship. It also explores the strategic consequences for Ethiopia and provides an independent, peace-oriented analysis aligned with the values of African Hearts for Peace and Ethiopian Hearts for Peace, and our ongoing dialogue work with these organizations. 1. What is the ideological foundation of the 2025 strategy? The NSS begins with a critique of U.S. foreign policy since the fall of the Soviet Union. It argues that American elites, in pursuit of a global rules-based order, overreached by attempting to reshape other societies, promote democracy everywhere, and acts as the world's permanent protector. According to the strategy, this led to overextension of military and financial commitments, neglect of domestic industry and infrastructure, excessive entanglement in foreign conflicts, dependence on global supply chain controlled by adversaries, erosion of U.S. sovereignty through international institutions. The strategy philosophical core is distilled into two words, repeated, emphasized: America first. But to understand its global implications, we must expand this into the document's full belief system. 1. Sovereignty above internationalism. The NSS rejects the idea that international institutions, global norms, or multilateral organizations should constrain U.S. decisions. This reflects a return to pre-World War II thinking, where bilateral, interest-based diplomacy is preferred. 2. Non-intervention, but not isolation. The strategy claims the US should avoid unnecessary foreign entanglement, but it still intervenes in conflicts where US interests, energy, minerals, trade routes, nuclear risks are threatened. This is selective interventionism. 3. Fairness, reciprocity, and burden sharing. Allies must carry their own weight, especially NATO. These themes shapes the entire document. 4. Economic nationalism, industrial revival, tariffs, reshoring, and supply chain security are treated as national security imperatives. The US economy, not its military arsenal, is framed as a foundation for future power. 5. Migration as a national security priority. The NSS is explicit. The era of mass migration must end. It's a good thing, right? Border control is framed not only as domestic policy but foreign policy, and the US will pressure other countries to reduce outward migration. These philosophical anchors define all regional strategies, including Africa's. So, in this global vision, what the US wants? The strategy is clear and unapologetic in outlining America's desire. 1. Military dominance without overextension. 2. Economic supremacy through industrial and technological leadership. 3. A world where migration is tightly controlled. 4. Control of supply chains and critical materials. 5. Sovereignty in decisions without foreign interference. 6. Energy dominance through oil, gas, nuclear, and domestic production. 7. A strong, confident American cultural identity. Unlike previous strategies that spoke in generalities, example, promoting democracy, stability, or shared global prosperity, this NSS expresses specific self-interest objectives based on material benefits and national security calculations. This clarity is what makes the document influential and controversial. What does this mean? What is Americans means? The assets it plans to use. The NSS lists tools that will be deployed. 1. Economic leverage. Tariffs, trade agreements, sanctions, and the power of the US dollar remain central instruments. 2. Technological superiority. AI, biotech, quantum computing, and advanced manufacturing at the center of long-term strategy. 3. Military power. The US will remain the world's most capable military actor but want allies to do more. 4. Energy advantage. The return to oil, gas, coal, and nuclear energy is seen as a strategic weapon against adversaries. 5. Soft power. Interestingly, the document still relies heavily on America's cultural and educational influence. So let's see the global strategy by region, because the NSS rank global regions by importance. Africa is included, but only after the Western Hemisphere, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, a sign of limited prioritization. Let's break this down. A. Western Hemisphere, the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. The US will not tolerate Chinese or Russian influence in Latin America. Migration, cartels, and trade control dominate priorities. B. Asia, the center of global competition. China is viewed as a major competitor. The Indo-Pacific is the most important economic theater of the 21st century. C. Europe, prevent civilizational decline. The US sees Europe as culturally and demographically declining. Washington wants Europe to take responsibility for its own defense. D. Middle East. Less war, more investment. The strategy insists the era of forever wars is over. The US wants stability, controlled energy flows, and expanded Abraham Accords. E. Africa, a new extractive partnership. The Africa section, though shorter, is transformative. Now, the US strategy for Africa can be analyzed as follows. The Africa section shifts American engagement away from humanitarian concerns. First, you create chaos, make people needy, and now you're shifting towards economic and geopolitical interests. Here are its pillars. 1. Shift from aid to investment. This is the most important change. The US declares that the era of American aid-driven development is over. It criticizes the tradition of food aid, NGO-led special social programs, large-scale humanitarian assistance, democracy-building efforts, debt forgiveness. Now, these are seen as ineffective or counterproductive. Opposition figures, the governments, they all advocate for democracy. Believe me, democracy is not working in Africa. We have to come up with a different system. What the US wants now. The US want trade deals. They don't want to hear you about democracy. They want mineral extraction agreements, plain and simple. They want energy sector partnerships, plain and simple again. Infrastructure investments to compete with the Chinese. They also want resource sharing arrangements, meaning they don't want the people, they want the land. This shift aligns with China's model in Africa. They are trying to copycat the Chinese, but with very different values and structures. They do this with selective partnership, only capable and reliable states, meaning those shaped by US former policies. The NSS states openly that the US will not work with unstable, corrupt, or anti-American governments. Instead, it will limit deep partnership to stable economies, countries willing to open their markets, governments seen as reliable based on US interests, states with critical mineral resources, energy-rich nations, gas, oil, geothermal, nuclear potential. This means the US will favor Kenya, Ghana, Morocco, South Africa, Botswana, Rwanda, potentially stability brokers like Tanzania or Zambia. Let's see how these countries react. They already started some provocative warmongering to some African countries like DRC and Nigeria. Countries like Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and sometimes Ethiopia may be seen as unstable partners until governance stabilizes, which means the work is done, divide them according to their ethnicity or religion and create conflict and let them kill each other is working. Now we can see the Tigrayans. The Eritreans are long gone, the Tigrayans, but the Eritreans are still active in Ethiopian affairs. The Tigrayans, The Oromo, the Amharas, the Somalis, and other nations are fighting each other, both in ideology, resource, and so forth. They all want to be favored by United States. Here is a news. You're not all qualified. Whoever wins US favor, if that's all what you want. Now, how preventing conflict and managing flashpoints work? The NSS highlights 2 African conflict zones explicitly. DRC, Rwanda ongoing, Sudan collapse and civil war. And one potential flashpoint will be Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. This shows the Horn of Africa is viewed as one of the most dangerous regions in the world, not due to terrorism alone, but due to ethno-national conflicts that the United States created. Weak states, proxy wars, foreign influence, UAE, China, Turkey, Russia. Red Sea competition, migration flows, mineral competition. The US wants peace, but without committing military forces or long-term humanitarian investment. So no US military boots on the ground. The NSS is explicit. No new wars, no long-term American troop presence, no peacekeeping missions, no military nation buildings. Africa is expected to deal with African conflicts, which is good in a way. This aligns with the idea of African-led councils of wisdom and technocratic conflict mediation. I love this because it removes the foreign power involvement. But there is a trick to this. United States focus on critical minerals and energy, correct? The US wants access to minerals essential for AI, batteries, aerospace, and manufacturing. Cobalt from DRC, lithium, Zimbabwe and Mali, rare earth metals, several African nations. Tantalum, Rwanda. Gold, Ghana, Sudan, Ethiopia. Copper in Zambia. In energy, the US wants to partner in nuclear energy, natural gas, liquefied petroleum gas, geothermal like Ethiopia, Kenya, Djibouti, and then oil extraction. This is a return to resource-driven foreign policy in Africa. This is all in countering Chinese and Russian presence. Although the document avoids mentioning specific rivals, the meaning is clear. China dominates African infrastructure and mineral extraction. Russia dominates security partnership. The US sees this as dangerous long term. Thus, the NSS pushes for American companies to compete aggressively in mining contracts, energy development, telecommunication, 5G, 6G, what have you, AI infrastructure, logistic hubs, financial markets. What are the implications for Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa? That's the point of our discussion today. This applies the NSS themes directly to the Horn region. 1. The US will pressure Ethiopia to avoid large-scale war. The strategy directly mentions the possibility of war involving Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. The US believes such a conflict would destabilize the Red Sea, drive mass migration, disrupt global shipping, attract foreign militaries, threaten access to minerals and energy corridors. Thus, Ethiopia will face diplomatic pressure to resolve internal conflicts, Amhara, Oromo, Tigray specifically. Avoid confrontation with Eritrea, avoid escalation with Somalia, maintain Red Sea stability without Ethiopia in it, open to investment rather than military alliance with outside powers. Remember how Ethiopia lost the coastline? United States directly guided the Tigrayan and Eritrean militias to topple a stable government in Ethiopia. Along the way, losing the coastline for Eritrea, and Eritrea becoming a state. The British and the United States gave that way. And then while the Tigrayans were forced to administer Ethiopia, they link them in ethnic-based federalism that is tearing apart the country today. This is a truth. So, in any case, Ethiopia must demonstrate stable governance to attract U.S. partnership. Landlocked, remember. The U.S. wants capable, reliable governments to partner with. This puts responsibility on Ethiopia to stabilize regions. How? Reduce human rights violations. How? Restore transparency in governance. How? Professionalize economic institutions. How? Corruption is everywhere. Secure mineral development frameworks. That's the trick. Maintain predictable foreign policy. They will make your foreign policy. If not, the US may prefer Kenya or Tanzania as East African investment hub. Let them do that. Maybe those nations are more acceptable than Ethiopians for foreign milling. 3. Critical minerals make Ethiopia more valuable. Ethiopia has substantial but underdeveloped deposits of gold, tantalum, copper, potash, rare earth metals. Under this strategy, Ethiopia gains new strategic value, but only if stability improves. There is no way stability can improve if ethnic federalism allowed to continue. US has a direct control on the north, the Tigrayans specifically, and they will not let Article 39 be erased. So US has to put pressure on that. Amhara Orthodox Christians are being slaughtered because they are termed as historical oppressors, and United States has a fair share of this. So the US will not intervene in the Ethiopia's internal conflict unless it spills over. That's what the document says. Humanitarian crisis in Ethiopia will receive less attention because the US is abandoning the aid model. Africa is not a top global priority. The US avoids involvement in civil conflicts. Economic interests outweigh humanitarian concerns. Did you see those Chinese? They work, but they don't care what happens between us. That's what the US is going to do. Those expecting aid from United States, forget it. Those who call upon United States to intervene in the name of democracy, forget it. You are at war, you fight. You are the winner, you are the winner. You will be able to receive a substantial amount of deals from the US. Until then, lots of people are gonna die. Thus, responsibility falls on local leaders now, which aligns with our peace-building approach. No matter who wins, no matter how much you fight, Ethiopia will not be governed by one ethnic group. Be it Tigrayans, they cannot come back and rule Ethiopia again. Be it Amhara, it cannot unite the whole nation as it used to for centuries. Be it Oromo itself, it cannot unite. Be all Ethiopian ethnic groups divided, there will be no peace, because this is all about resource competition. Nobody wants the people on the land. Eritreans, nobody wants you. Tigrayans, nobody wants you in that land. Amharas, nobody wants you in that land. Oromos, nobody wants you in that land. Only the resources, because the current US policy is resource focused. And global powers also focus on those resources. They might give you a little bit cash here and there and some technological advanced war machineries, but by fragmenting, you will not secure peace, because the land you think is yours overlaps on the land of others. No matter which region you are from, border lines are not clear, because people for centuries intermarried and they created this intermixed Ethiopian society. So it took nearly a century to create division in Ethiopia, and it takes another century to remove that division. It takes a pure sovereign Ethiopia so that people can stop fighting and look at each other eye for eye to eye and see a human being. In general, this strategy, American strategy, risks for Africa under this new strategy is that the strategy creates several risks African nations must manage. One, there will be a decline of humanitarian aid. Millions rely on food aid, medicine, and emergency relief. Under this NSS 2025, aid budgets may shrink, famine responses may weaken, conflict zones may receive limited outside support. For Ethiopia, this means Tigray, Amhara, Benishangul, and Oromia conflict victims may see fewer humanitarian supplies. Essentially, they can die. Number two, US focus only on resource-rich states. Countries without minerals or energy may be deprioritized, ignored, politically abandoned. This may increase fragmentation in the Sahel, Horn, and Central Africa. So those people who run out of war go to less resource places like deserts where nothing can grow. It can be in the Great Rift Valley where volcanic activity erupts every moment, where you cannot grow anything. There you can get peace. Whereas the place where gold and valuable minerals are, conflict will bleed the people. 3. Greater regional power competition. This is true. If the US steps back, other powers will step in. We have seen that. Now US is withdrawing. Now the China infrastructures and mines are there. They will take a good hold. Governments will choose the Chinese. And then you have Russia or Russia, who has a very good security, a Wagner type of engagement in Africa. That will be a preferred alignment for majority of African leaders. And then you have UAE, ports and proxy groups, United Arab Emirates, and the Saudis. They have special interests. And you have also Turkey, that has a military partnership in the region. You have Iran, malicious political influences in Africa. This could heighten conflict in Ethiopia, Somalia, Sudan, and DRC. So either way, United States will be drawn into conflict again, because the interest is clear. Everyone needs resources from Africa. That resource will put them, the superpowers, into competition, and we become the battleground. So migration pressure from Africa could increase. That's how far. If aid reduces and conflict grows, migration might rise. But the US and Europe will tighten borders, leaving African migrants stranded. which means my advice to you, my people, is to stop fighting among each other, because there's no way to run now. 5. Potential for exploitation of mineral resources. Investment-driven policy may lead to environmental degradation, displacement of communities, exploitation without development, corruption in contracts, neo-extractive relationship. So when you look at these, they are happening now. US will strengthen those through this policy. So where are the opportunities for Africa under the NSS? Despite risks, there are opportunities if Africa is strategic. 1. Investment may replace aid. If African nations manage resources well, this can lead to stronger infrastructure, economic growth, jobs, technological transfer, industrial development, which is not bad. This will put the two nations in competition to do better without war, without conflicts. The two nations, I mean the Chinese and the Americans. So there has to be African-led peace solutions, and that is more valuable to us here, African Hearts for Peace and Ethiopian Hearts for Peace. Because with the US backing away from intervention, African institutions, councils of wisdom, elders mediation, technocratic governance, regional peace frameworks all become critical. These are the things we have been saying again and again. So our model of meritocratic governance and African Hearts for Peace dialogue platforms fit perfectly with this new global environment. Why we say meritocratic? Because technology requires skilled manpower. Without that governance, traditional elders without education cannot manage this pressure from foreigners. There is also mineral and energy wells that can strengthen African geopolitically, because Africa holds 30% of global minerals reserves, 60% of cobalt, major lithium deposits, huge solar and hydropower potential, and is also a hub for food production. African countries can negotiate from a position of strength. That is if stable. So there is a new market for African exports. The US wants energy, minerals, manufactured goods, nearshoring, stable partners. If African economies diversify, this could create long-term benefits. So what are the internal contradictions in the NSS 2025? NSS National Security Strategies 2025. Even though the strategy is coherent, it has contradictions. 1. It says non-intervention versus preventing conflicts. The US refused military presence but still want to prevent Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia war. But how can you prevention succeed without involvement? How? You can leave it. They keep fighting. People keep running, knocking your door. You can close the door. People will drown. Will that make United States what it was, what's meant to be? The other contradiction is ending migration while reducing aid. If aid shrinks, migration may rise, the opposite of US goals. 3. Promoting sovereignty while imposing trade conditions. The US says it supports sovereignty but demands partnership, adopt certain economic rules, open markets, block Chinese and Russian companies. This can seem like conditional sovereignty. Don't you think? To work with us, you have to close your market with Chinese and Russian. Who African country will agree to that? Unless the boots on the ground come and forcibly seize a sovereign nation. This is not going to work. So in general, Africa is deprioritized, but minerals are essential now. Africa is low priority militarily, but high priority economically. This tension shapes future US-Africa engagement. You can make a deal today with one dictator and another one go to the other side and get aid and topple it. So here is our peace-oriented analysis. African Hearts for Peace. From the perspective of African Hearts for Peace, the NSS 2025 is not a moral or humanitarian document. It is a strategic one. It does not center African human dignity, trauma, or healing. Its objective is securing American interests, not African well-being. However, Africa can still benefit if it acts wisely. 1. African peace structure become more important because foreign intervention is receding. African peace systems must rise. So our idea of regional councils of wisdom, technocratic mediation, truth-based dialogues, local elders councils, meritocratic system of governance is more relevant than ever. We can use this model as a modular systems that can be interconnected and expanded throughout Africa. The Horn of Africa must resolve internal conflicts peacefully. If the US will not solve Amhara conflict, that's for sure, or hear Tigray grievances anymore. They have been used and thrown out. Oromo's federal disputes will not be heard. Eritrea-Ethiopian tensions might raise concern, but they don't care if Ethiopia grabs Eritrea and put it back into its knees. And also, Red Sea access issues will dominate the views of Ethiopia. Why Ethiopia was forced to be landlocked in the first place? That is because Ethiopia was a powerful nation in that horn. Now it's crippled. Red Sea is theirs. This increased the need for Ethiopia-led reconciliation. Our mediation platform is the exact type of solution envisioned here. 3. African Union is now a strategic necessity. Nobody will fund you, African Union. Listen to this. Unless you do exactly what they say. Because external powers compete over African minerals. African countries must unite. Unite in a new way. Negotiate better deals. To negotiate better deals. To prevent exploitation and protect their sovereignty. Real people have to be in African unions for the future. So our concept of modular technocratic governance becomes an alternative to foreign dependency. I think it is a very long conversation because in 2025 NSS is big, which is a blueprint for a very different US-Africa relationship. We should consider concluding everything we discussed. Essentially, this document is driven into a more investment, less aid, more minerals, fewer humanitarian missions, more self-reliance, less US military involvement, more geopolitical competition, higher expectations of African governments, lower tolerance for instability, increased pressure to control migration. If that is that, for Ethiopia and the Horn, peace is now an urgent geopolitical requirement. Foreign military support will decline. Investment will depend on stability. Mineral and energy wealth increase strategic value. Internal conflicts must be resolved through dialogue, not war. This aligns almost perfectly with our mission. mediation, truth, healing, African-led solutions, councils of wisdom, technocratic competency, self-reliance. This is Africa's moment to shape its own path, or risk being shaped again by external powers. This is Ababa Nagash again on behalf of Ethiopian Hearts for Peace and African Hearts for Peace. Thank you.